Good evening. After a decade of government debate, the Prime Minister has thrown his weight behind the HS2 rail line, but admits it's been a controversial and difficult decision.
The high-speed line is expected to cost more than £100 billion. Trains that travel at 225 miles an hour will link London and Birmingham in 45 minutes, but it will divide the Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire countryside, passing towns like Wendover, Aylesbury, Wadston, Brackley and Banbury. It'll open sometime between 2028 and 2031. Phase 2 would connect Birmingham to Crewe, Nottingham, Manchester and Leeds and open in 20 years' time.
Well, in a few minutes, we'll get reaction in Cllr in Buckinghamshire, where the HS2 depot is due to be built. But first to our transport correspondent, Mike Pearce, who spent the day at the Wendover Active Resistance Camp.
Well, they've been fighting the HS2 project and the towns and villages in Buckinghamshire and Oxfordshire for the last decade. So clear disappointment tonight that the scheme has got this final go-ahead. We've been listening to both sides of the argument. If all goes to the latest plan, trains like these will be speeding through Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire within a decade. They already run in Italy and are one of a number proposed for the new line.
HS2, shame on you! HS2!
The project has long been at the centre of controversy, but today came the long-awaited go-ahead following a wide-ranging review.
If we start now, services could be running by the end of the decade. So today, Mr. Speaker, the Cabinet has given high-speed rail the green signal. We are going to get this done. And to ensure that we do so without further blowouts on either cost or schedule, we are today taking decisive action to restore discipline to the programme.
This has got out of control. It was never properly planned. And, frankly, it's an idea that was maybe good 20 years ago, but it needs rethinking now.
£9 billion has already been spent planning and preparing the route. Here, for example, near Aylesbury, ponds are being built for newts and fellow creatures to be relocated. For many years, there have been mass protests. You've been fighting for this for many years now, haven't you? I mean, how does it feel today not to have got what you would like?
Oh, this is really disappointing. I mean, it's clearly the wrong decision, both for Buckinghamshire and the entire country. This was the opportunity to do a genuine review, actually see what the pros and cons were and come up with a really balanced decision. And I just don't feel that's been done.
The government want more work on the northern end of the scheme to see if money can be saved. The scheme is tens of billions of pounds over budget and years late, but it will now become reality. Well, in the camp here, they are pretty determined to do all they can to stop HS2. Let's talk to some local people here. What's your reaction to today's news?
I'm in a bit of a state of shock. I know our transport infrastructure needs a lot of improvements, and I'm all in favour of that. But it's difficult to see how many of the problems on the infrastructure is solved by HS2 for such a huge amount of money.
OK, let's move along.
Well, Boris described this as the backbone of Great Britain. It's a concrete spine going up through Great Britain that will fragment the environment, it will decimate our climate and be a spinal tap for the construction industry and more of our billions down the drain.
Let's talk to someone in the camp here. How determined are you? I mean, Boris was saying today that this will benefit every part of the country. How do you respond to that?
Well, I'd firstly say we're determined to work with the local community to resist HS2 and the damage that's going to be done here. In terms of benefiting people across the country, there's billions being spent on a project that is going to benefit very few, when those billions could be spent on plenty of other sectors like the NHS or youth or mental health services that could benefit millions, really.
Are you prepared to resist and stay in the trees and all that sort of stuff?
Absolutely. I think it's really important that we send a strong message nationally that even when the government's making the wrong decision, that local communities and people will come together to resist destruction of the environment and loss of habitat, loss of homes, loss of businesses and effects to their health.
OK, one more here. What's your view? I mean, they're saying some of the northern cities are saying really good news for them.
I have heard the contrary. I think east to west needs updating up north. I don't think there's any case for bridging the gap between north and south in terms of travel via HS2. That doesn't already happen.
OK, well, thank you all very much indeed for joining us. Of course, it's not only here in Wendover that there's concern. Other parts of the region as well, as Cllr Martin Tett has been finding out.
If you look across the fence here, this is where we have this beautiful view over open countryside now, and the railway will be 50, 70 metres beyond these line of trees here.
Traversing miles of countryside, the impact of HS2 will be felt by thousands. In Twyford, the line will pass 170 metres from Gary Eastman's house.
It'll be on a 7-metre embankment, and in front of it will be a 12-metre high earth bund, blocking out the view. Complete wall of bund right the way across the countryside there.
Gary has been protesting High Speed 2 for years. Today, sadness and resignation.
Devastated, absolutely devastated. I mean, there was a slim hope that it would be cancelled, a very slim hope, I think. But in truth, it isn't. It hasn't been cancelled, it won't be cancelled, and now we've got to put up with the consequences. This has torn through our village and torn through people's lives, real people, real devastation, loss of land, loss of property, loss of income. It's just been awful, and I don't know whether people really realise how bad it actually is.
It's a story repeated all along the route, where in many places land clearing and work sites have already taken hold. And it's not just the human cost to villages, farms and businesses.
Will have a massive impact. So all the land you can see around us, all this habitat right down to the lake, will be lost to HS2 because they'll clear the entire area.
Calvert Jubilee Nature Reserve is home to birds, wildfowl and butterflies. Land right next to it has been cleared, and some trees on the site have already been felled.
Well, obviously I'm devastated that the decision has gone the way it has, but we're still urging the Prime Minister, even if you're going ahead with this project, in order to stop it being an absolute environmental disaster, they need to stop and rethink their approach. They need to put the environment and wildlife at the heart of their plans.
Despite years of campaigning here, HS2 will go ahead. Homes, landscapes and habitats will change. People here can now only hope to limit the damage. That word devastation, we've heard it so many times in connection with HS2. The feeling that people have that their homes, their fields, their gardens are being sliced in half with so little benefit to them. After all, if you live here in Buckinghamshire, you wouldn't go to Birmingham via London. Now I'm standing in front of one of many places where works for HS2 have already begun. And I think it's been incredibly difficult for people here watching all this going on, watching trees being felled, heavy machinery moving into the countryside, all while the review of HS2 was taking place. Today, perhaps a process of acceptance can begin to take place, and the knowledge at the very least that works like this haven't been for nothing. And I would say it's very difficult to find anybody in this part of the world in favour of HS2. Today we did. They work on this site, so they couldn't speak to us. They at least will go home knowing that they have a job.
Charlotte Breer, Edney there. Well, in a joint statement, the leader of Buckinghamshire County Council, Martin Tett, and the leader of Aylesbury Vale District Council said HS2 is the wrong decision, not just for Buckinghamshire, but for the country.
But at Westminster, many MPs who've campaigned against HS2 are tonight admitting defeat. But they say they'll continue their efforts to make sure people living on the route get proper compensation. Our political correspondent Phil Hornby sent this.
Prime Minister, are the Cabinet all behind HS2? Is this the right decision for the country?
Mr Johnson heading to the House of Commons knowing his own Tory MPs have been bitterly divided over HS2.
The Cabinet has given high-speed rail the green signal.
Sceptical Tory MPs wanted an assurance that people living on the route will get proper compensation and communities that suffer will get something in return.
If it's impossible to regrow ancient trees or to get rid of congestion where there is congestion, can we please compensate communities by, for example, building their local hospital?
People have been treated appallingly by HS2 Limited. They haven't been given the money they're owed. HS2 Limited has not complied with the legal obligations on it. The Prime Minister's promised that will change.
Can I urge my right honourable friend, and indeed anybody that seeks to celebrate the HS2 decision, to keep central in their mind the blight that it will bring to communities up and down the route, not just on the landscape, but people's lives.
I'm afraid that happens with these big projects. There needs to be proper compensation. You need to take proper account of that. But once a decision has been taken democratically to proceed, you cannot keep endlessly delaying.
When David Cameron first backed HS2 10 years ago, he said it would mean no need for a third runway at Heathrow. So is that still the case?
Will the Prime Minister now prove his credentials on climate change, make good his promise of lying down in front of the bulldozers, or far more simply, just cancel the third runway?
I see no bulldozers at present, nor no immediate prospect of them arriving.
And the Prime Minister's final message to the doubters?
Every single infrastructure project is opposed at this critical moment. We've got to have the guts, the foresight to drive it through.
Well, with me is one of the MPs we saw there questioning the Prime Minister, Greg Smith, the new Conservative MP for Buckingham. Do you accept tonight, Mr Smith, that the battle against HS2 is over?
Yeah, there's been a clear decision from the government. It's going to go ahead. And so, whilst I don't think it's the right decision for Buckinghamshire and I don't think it's the right decision for the country, it's happening. And so my job is now one of ensuring we get gold-plated mitigation for the blight that it's going to cause my constituency, not just the landscape, but people's lives and their property.
We heard stories in the House of Commons from quite a few MPs about how badly people feel they've been treated throughout this process.
There has got to be a mega shake-up of HS2 Limited. I've called on the Prime Minister to put in place an independent body with real teeth, real powers to hold HS2 Limited's feet to the fire.
Greg Smith, thank you very much indeed for joining us. So the decision has been made, but clearly the arguments will go on.